Today we are talking about a very important introduction to the Buddha. And it is also a very important introduction to the teaching of the Buddha. So this sutra called the Tevijjavacchagotta Sutta. Tevijja means the threefold knowledge, three knowledges. Te means three, Vijja means the knowledge. Vacchagotta is the name of the person who came to the Buddha and asked a question. So the sutra reads, "Thus have I heard." I have explained many times why these sutras starts as "Thus have I heard." Because the Buddha said, when we speak of any ideas, we should not say that this is the truth. Because it can be questioned and proved false. So the only true statement is to say, this is what I think, or this is what I have heard, or this is what I have read in a book, or this is what I read in the papers, or this is what someone told me. That way of saying is saying it in the right way. So every sutra starts, "Thus have I heard." On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Vesali in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Now on that occasion, the wanderer Vacchagotta was staying in the wanderer's park of the single white lotus mango tree. Then when it was morning, the Blessed One dressed and taking his bowl and outer robe, went into Vesali for alms. Then the Blessed One thought, it is still too early to wander for alms in Vesali. Suppose I went to the wanderer Vacchagotta to the wondrous park of the single white lotus mango tree. Then the Blessed One went to the wondrous Vacchagotta in the wondrous park of the single white lotus mango tree. The wanderer Vacchagotta saw the Blessed One coming in the distance and said to him, "Let the Blessed One come. Venerable Sir, welcome to the Blessed One. It is long since the Blessed One found an opportunity to come here. Let the Blessed One be seated. This seat is ready." The Blessed One sat down on the seat made ready. And the wanderer Vacchagotta took a low seat, sat down at one side, and said to the Blessed One, "Venerable Sir, I have heard this. The recluse Gautama claims to be omniscient and all-seeing, to have complete knowledge and vision. Thus, whether I am walking or standing or sleeping or awake, knowledge and vision are continuously and uninterruptedly present to me. Venerable Sir, do those who speak thus say what has been said by the Blessed One or not, and not misrepresent him with what is contrary to fact? Do they explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from their assertion?" So the Buddha answers, "Vaccha, those who say thus do not say what has been said. By me, but misrepresent me with what is untrue and contrary to fact. Venerable Sir, how could I answer that? I may say what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent me with what is contrary to fact. How may I explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from my assertion?" Vaccha, if you answer thus, the recluse Gautama has the threefold true knowledge. You will be saying what has been said by me and will not misrepresent me with what is contrary to fact. You will explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from your assertion. For in so far as I wish, I recollect my manifold past lives, that is one birth, two birth, and so on. Thus with their aspects and particulars, I recollect my manifold past lives. And in so far as I wish, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, I see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. And I understand how beings pass on according to their actions. And by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I here and now enter upon and abide in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. If you answer thus, the recluse Gautama has the threefold true knowledge. You will be saying what has been said by me and will not misrepresent me with what is contrary to fact. You will explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from your assertion. When this was said, the wanderer Vacchagotta asked the Blessed One, Master Gautama, is there any householder who without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body has made an end of suffering? Vacha, there is no householder who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body, has made an end of suffering. Master Gautama, is there any householder who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body, has gone to heaven? Vacha, there are not only 100 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 500, but far more householders who, without abandoning the fetter of householdership on the dissolution of the body, have gone to heaven. Master Gautama, is there any Ajivaka who in the dissolution of the body has made an end of suffering? Vacha, there is no Ajivaka who, on the dissolution of the body has made an end of suffering. Master Gautama, is there any Ajivaka who, on the dissolution of the body, has gone to heaven? When I recollect the past 91 aeons, Vaccha, I do not recall any Ajivaka who, on the dissolution of the body, went to heaven, with one exception. And he held the doctrine of the moral efficacy of action, the doctrine of the moral efficacy of deeds. That being so, Master Gautama, that sectarian fold is empty, even of one who goes to heaven. That being so, Vaccha, that sectarian fold is empty, even of one who goes to heaven. Thus is what the Blessed One said. The wanderer Vacchagotta was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now this sutra points out very important facts. It's very important to understand that these three knowledges the first one is that the Buddha is able to recall his past life. As far back as he pleases. There is no end to his ability to recall his past. He can recall many lives. And the other thing is, he can see how a person, when that person dies, how that person is reborn again in a different life. He can see as if he is looking at someone who is going from one room to another room. If we stand at the door between two rooms, we can see how a person goes from one room to the other room. In the same way, he is able to see how when a person dies, he is reborn in another life. Now that ability to see these helps him to understand what is today called karma and rebirth, so that he knows that karma and rebirth is a fact. This is very important to know that. Those are the two knowledges that he spoke of. And then he spoke of a third knowledge. What is that third knowledge? Now here it only says, and by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I here and now enter upon and abide in the deliverance of mind and deliverance of wisdom, that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. Now that translation is not a good translation. Those words like taintlessness and all that doesn't bring in the idea. This is called, in Pali, Asavakkaya Jnana. Asavakkaya Jnana. That is what is translated as the asava. The word asava is translated here as taint. Asava doesn't mean taint. Asava is a flowing in. It's coming from the root sru. Sru is to flow. Asrava is to flow in. Srava is to flow out. Asrava is to flow in. So, I think the more appropriate translation should be influence. Influence is flowing in. Influence. This is a very important point here, which is not understood by most Buddhists who read these translations in English, and also those some people even who study Pali are not able to understand this. This is very important because According to modern thinking, it was Sigmund Freud, the German psychologist, who spoke about these emotions and how the emotions begin to create problems. And he also spoke about the necessity to gain control over the emotions. And he pointed out that the emotions cannot be got rid of. Said the emotions cannot be got rid of because the emotions are made into the system. The body has all the organs necessary for the emotions to be aroused. You know, we have what are called crackers that you light on, you set fire to the crackers and the crackers begin to bring big sounds, and sometimes they go up in the air, and you have various shows going on. They contain a kind of gunpowder, and when it is ignited, the sounds and the visible lights come out. So in a similar way, our body contains the organs necessary to produce anger or fear or sexual desires, worries, all those emotional excitements come up because the body contains these things. So therefore we cannot give up these things. That is what Freud said. So this is why one day when I went to United States and tried to talk about Buddhism, one man laughed. How can you give up these things? When I said the Buddha gave up lust, hate and delusion, lobha, dosa and moha. They said, no, that cannot be given up. That is what Freud told them. You see, it was later that I began to realize a new psychology had come up after Sigmund Freud. It was the cognitive psychology. They began to realize that it is true that the body contains all these organs necessary to produce the emotions. But that body does not produce the emotions unless the thinking part of the mind starts to think in a certain way and interpret what is going on outside. In other words, it depends on how you interpret your circumstances. The way you interpret your circumstances so it's very important to understand that. So today, in what is called cognitive psychotherapy, what they do is they try to make people change the way they interpret their circumstances. By changing the way they interpret their circumstances, the emotional arousal can be stopped. And this is what the Buddha pointed out. More than 25 centuries before, these Westerners began to understand this. And not only explain this, he made use of it to eradicate all emotional excitements and calm the mind. This is the important thing to understand. And that rooting out of all emotions that are really things that come from outside. When something happens in the external world, you begin to interpret that. And according to the interpretation, the emotion is aroused. And that is how it is something that comes from outside in and not something that comes from inside out. This is the important thing. This is why Sigmund Freud used the word instinct. Instinct means it is something that starts from inside. But the Buddha used the word this something that comes from outside He said, Pabassara midam bhikkave chittang agantuka upakkilese upakkilitang. What that means is, the mind, the chitta, is a clean thing. In other words, it is pure. The chitta is that emotional part of what we call the mind. So there are two parts, the emotional part and the thinking part. The emotional part was called chitta and the thinking part was called mano. The emotional part he says is originally pure. It gets polluted due to things coming from outside. Like water, when we speak of water, water is a pure substance. It gets polluted due to foreign matter falling into the water. In the same way, the mind is something that is pure. It gets polluted due to foreign things getting in. And this is why it can be purified. It can be purified only because it is a matter of getting rid of the pollutants. That is why we speak of distillation. To purify the water. So in the same way, the mind can be purified. That is the secret behind the method of the Buddha. So what we call meditation is learning to purify the mind by changing the way we interpret our circumstances. That's the main thing here. The main thing is for us to understand that there are two activities of the body that we call the mind. There is no separate thing called a mind. These are all activities of the body. One activity is the emotional excitement, and the other activity is the thinking. Now the modern scientists are aware that these two activities are dependent on two parts of the brain. The emotional part is dependent on what is called the limbic system, and the thinking part is dependent on what is called the cerebral cortex. So these are all activities of the body. There is no separate thing called a mind which can come out of the body and run to various places. That way of thinking is not the Buddha's way of thinking. But some Buddhists think of the mind as something that can come out of the body. Now the important thing here is to understand that there are three knowledges of the Buddha which are very important. The first two supports the idea of karma and rebirth. The third one is really what brings all suffering to an end. Which is the solution of the problem of existence. There is a sutra also in the Majjhima Nikaya which is called Sabbasava Sutra. The word asava is there. Asava is that flowing in or influence. In that Sabbasava Sutra, the Buddha points out that the normal person thinks, did I exist in the past? How did I exist in the past? In what way did I exist in the past? Will I be existing in the future? In what form will I exist in the future? Do I exist now? In what form do I exist now? In other words, the normal person is thinking in terms of the past, present and future. And that way of thinking confirms the idea I exist. And if you hold on to that idea, I exist, you'll never be able to gain freedom from suffering. In other words, to be thinking of karma and rebirth is to be unable to gain freedom from suffering. And then the Buddha points out the Arya Savaka, the disciple of the Buddha, doesn't think in that way. He is only thinking, what is suffering? What is the cause of suffering? What is the ending of suffering? And what is the way to end suffering? If he begins to think in that way, that person's suffering will come to an end. Why is this? This is something very important to understand. What this means is that karma and rebirth is a fact that the Buddha has seen through his own experience. Yet, if you keep on thinking in terms of karma and rebirth, you cannot gain freedom from suffering. If you want to get freedom from suffering, you have to start thinking in a different way. And that is to avoid thinking in the existential way. Now, that is the important thing to understand. What do we mean by existential way? To exist is to think in terms of an existence of a subject and an object. We are all the time thinking in terms of a subject and an object. When we go to learn the English language, we learn the subject, the object, and the verb. The subject, the object, and the verb. That is the normal way of thinking. That normal way of thinking, if continued, you cannot bring suffering to an end. That's what it means. So we have to get out of that way of thinking. So to get out of that way of thinking, is to think in what is called the experiential way of thinking. Now, what is that? The experiential way is to see that what we see or hear or smell or taste or touch is an experience. Seeing is an experience. Hearing is an experience. Normally we think I come first and you or the object comes and I see you or the object. So that means the subject and the object comes first, then the subject and object meets and the subject sees the object. That is how people think. But that is not what it is. The seeing comes first. And it is in the seeing that the subject is created and the object is created. It is in the process of seeing that I come into being. And the object comes into being. When that is properly understood, then the idea of existence disappears. It is only when that idea of existence disappears, you are free not only of existence, you are also free of what is called death. If you don't exist, how can you die? That is awakening from the dream of existence. This is why the Buddha is called Buddha. Buddha means one who has awakened from the dream of existence. One who has awakened from the dream of existence. That is that third knowledge that the Buddha spoke of. So I think I have explained the very important thing. And another important thing is these other questions that this Vacchagotta asks. Whether the person who is normally leading the household life, that is the common way of living today, whether by living in that way a person can bring all suffering to an end. As the Buddha says, no, it is not possible. To gain freedom from suffering, You have to give up that household way of living. But everyone cannot do that. This is why it is a gradual process of evolution of the human being. Giving up the household life, giving up the pursuit of sensual pleasure, is a necessary step in awakening from the dream of existence. Because the normal household life is all being in the dream of existence. These are very important things to understand. So, I hope you understood these things, and we can end our discussion here. If you have any questions, you can ask, and we can
Bhante, I think the third knowledge, I think it's not very clear, because it says here deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom. So what exactly does deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom really means?
This is the problem with the translations. You see, the Pali words are Cheto Vimukti and Panya Vimukti. Cheto is translated as mind, and Panya is translated as wisdom. This is the problem. That translation is what prevents people from understanding what is being said. Cheta, I told you there are two activities of the body that we refer to as mind. The chitta and mano. Chitta is the emotional part, and mano is the thinking part, or the rational part. These are simply activities of the body. It is very important to understand that. Cheto Vimukti and Panya Vimukti. Vimukti is really freedom. Vimukti is freedom. The cheto refers to the thinking, the emotional part. And Panya refers to the thinking part, the intellect. What is called the intellect. This is very important to understand that. Now, the modern psychologists are aware of this. Sigmund Freud used two words to refer to the emotional part and the thinking part. The emotional part was called the id, id. And the thinking part was called ego. These are Latin words, Latin. And the modern cognitive psychologists have started using the emotional part was called the affective, and the thinking part is called the cognitive. The affective and the cognitive. But normally, people who speak English, they also are aware of this. The thinking part they call the head. The emotional part they call the heart. The head and the heart. So this is why it is very important to understand this, that these two parts people are normally aware of, and they begin to use different words. But the important thing to know is that these are really activities of the body, and there is no such thing as a mind that is separate from the body. What we call the mind is simply an activity of the body. And today the modern science called biology, they have started talking about the thing called evolution, biological evolution, that this thing called life is simply an electrochemical activity. There is no person involved in this thing called life. And this electrical activity is the activity of atoms and molecules. Now when people talk about activities, electrochemical activities, they speak of atoms and molecules. So they have understood that this thing called life started when a special kind of molecule came into being. And this special kind of molecule was able to absorb atoms from the surroundings and produce molecules of its own kind. They call it the self-duplicating molecule. And this molecule, because it can produce new molecules of its own kind, the number of molecules started increasing. And when it started increasing, but another problem came up, that every molecule that was formed could not remain in that state all the time. It broke down. And so, whatever is integrated is subject to disintegration. So there were two processes going on, a building up process and a breaking down process. When the building up process was faster than the breaking down process, the net result was growth. When the breaking down process was faster than the building up process, the net result was decay. And this whole struggle, it started. This struggle is what Charles Darwin saw as the struggle for existence. But the existence was not really possible because everything breaks down. So there was only the struggle to exist, but no real existence. So the struggle that continued perpetuated this thing called life. And this life means the molecules began to turn into cells, the cells began to turn into tissues, the tissues began to turn into organs, the organs began to turn into systems, systems began to turn into organisms, and organisms kept on increasing, and of course they couldn't continue because the environment changed. When the environment changed, the organisms could not continue. It has to die. But some organisms were able to somehow change and modify. And that is how it could survive. But the survival was always not a permanent survival. Everything had to die. Every organism had to die. And it went on changing till the human being came into being. It is only when the human being came into being that the human being was able to understand what is going on. And ultimately realize the right thing to do is to stop this futile struggle. It was not only futile, it was also painful struggle. And only by realizing this fact properly, that the struggle stops. That stopping of that struggle is becoming a Buddha by awakening from the dream of existence. There is no real existence here. Yeah?
So Bhante, can you explain on the second half of the sutta?
Come here and talk.
Bhante, can you explain more on the second half of, like just now Bhante was saying, the householder, you actually can't end suffering. And how about here talking about heaven? What does that mean? Householder on the going to heaven, and also on the
householder can go to heaven.
So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Go to heaven means
not. It doesn't mean the end of suffering, is it? It doesn't mean the end of suffering, isn't it? Going to heaven.
Going to heaven means what?
It's the end of suffering, is it? It's the end of suffering. Going to heaven from Buddhist perspective doesn't mean it's the end of suffering, isn't it?
Going to heaven means to be reborn in a good situation.
Okay. And then the other part is on the Ajivaka. What is that?
Ajivaka.
Except for one.
Ajivaka means during the time of the Buddha, there were people who were living the life receiving the gifts given by people. Those were the Ajivakas. They were not living a household life.
Okay.
Those were the Ajivakas.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante, I would like to ask, what is the purpose of the first knowledge and the second knowledge in this threefold knowledge?
First knowledge was to recall the past lives.
Yes, I would like, how can we understand what is the purpose of this knowledge? There must be a purpose, otherwise the Buddha would not have attained this knowledge, right? There must be a reason. What is the reason for the that he could see his past life, and what is the reason that he could see the other beings deceasing and appearing? How? There must be a reason behind this. I think.
That is by purifying the mind. You are able to gain such powers. When the mind is purified to a certain level, then you can recall your past lives, and you can also see how beings are reborn. Not ordinary people can't do it.
Yes, it's a power. Don't you think there is any benefit, any purpose? Is it necessary to have the first knowledge and the second knowledge to gain the third knowledge? Is this the Tevijja is a complete set? Is the first knowledge necessary and the second knowledge to gain was it necessary to gain the final knowledge which brought the liberation? Are they necessary? What is your how do you explain?
Did you understand what he said? Huh? Huh?
The three levels of the knowledge.
Huh?
Tevijja.
Three levels of the knowledge.
Uh-huh.
The first one, the Buddha able to see his past lives
Yeah.
in the beginning. The second one, seeing other people's
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So these two knowledges, is there a connection for the Buddha to get to the third knowledge? Is it a continuous progression of purification, which he could see his life, he could see the other people's life, and then eventually realize?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a progressive path.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes, that is the question. Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes. Is the first knowledge is like a step to the second knowledge, and then a step to the
Yeah.
final
Yeah.
knowledge?
Yeah. It is.
Bhante, why is it that the Ajivaka cannot go to heaven?
Huh?
According to this, it says the householder can go to heaven. But in the case of the Ajivaka, he cannot go to heaven. Why is that?
Because the Ajivakas were not practicing the good karma. That is the reason. The behavior of the Ajivakas were not really good behavior. If they behaved in the good way, then they can go to heaven.
Because we are not sure what an Ajivaka really is, but according to
Ajivaka simply means they were beggars.
beggars
Yeah.
waiting for food to be given to them.
Ah.
So in other words, in their normal life, they don't practice sila themselves. That's why they don't go to heaven.
That's
So
right.
those who want to go to heaven, you know what to do lah.
Bhante, is it true that lay people who eventually attain arahantship, they either renounce and become monastic, or they will die really shortly after? Is that from the sutta or commentary?
I didn't hear you properly.
Should be repeated.
Did you hear that properly?
She was asking, if a lay person becomes an arahant, does he then go on to become a monk and so on? Is that the question?
That's the two become a monk and nun, or
A lay person.
die really soon. Is that true?
A lay person cannot become arahant without giving up the lay kind of life. But if by some chance the lay kind of life is given up and that person becomes an arahant, he will give up the lay life and become a monk or nun. That is what it is. There is that story of a person called Asita. He had 7 wives and he was a rich man and he had a 7-story building, his house. So he started meditating and he asked the wives to provide the food for him, and he went up to the top floor and he was meditating. After some time he came down and said, "My dear sisters," and these wives began to cry because they were not being treated as wives anymore. And so he said, if there is anyone who wants to get married to some person, tell me, I will arrange the wedding ceremony and I will get you married. So the chief wife said, then get me married to such and such a person, gave a name. And so he called that man and asked whether he likes to marry her. He said yes, and so he was given in marriage. And he says, if the Buddha says, I have become a anagami, a non-returner, I won't be surprised. So that means he has reached a high level. But he was able to reach that high level only because he gave up the normal lay kind of life. So you cannot become arahant by remaining in the normal lay life. And if you become an arahant, you will give up that kind of life.
What about the other part of that? The other part of the myth is that they will either become a monastic, otherwise they'll die very shortly after. Is that one true too, from the sutta? Any story like that?
What is he saying?
Commentary, yeah? Okay.
What was he saying?
The one... yeah. I think it's the pitch.
You explain to me what he is saying.
Yeah.
She was saying, if a lay person becomes an arahant, they will either become a monk to continue the life as a monk, or they will die very quickly. That is according to the commentaries. Is that true?
No, that is a wrong way of saying it. The thing is that that person will become a monk unless he dies before he became a monk. That is the reason. Not that he is going to die because he became an arahant. That is not true. Yeah.
Bhante, this question comes about because the Buddha's father, King Sododana, he was reputed to have died as an arahant. It is in some.
Died as an arahant?
Yeah. This was what's said about. So, because he was not a monk, the question which he asked in the sutta was because he died as a lay person, although he was a king, he became an arahant and he was not a monk, and that was where he died after gaining arahanthood. That was the story about becoming an arahant, and if you don't become a monk, then you will die.
I don't know whether he became an arahant. At least that is not clearly stated anywhere.
But that's the story that's the story which we've been told. That's one commentary.
Okay. Yeah.
To awaken from the dream of existence, the third knowledge is necessary, right? Is a necessary condition. Is that true for everybody? Is it a necessary condition, the third knowledge? To gain this knowledge, is that true?
What is he saying?
To awaken from the dream of existence.
Now, you say without the microphone?
To awaken from the dream of existence.
Yeah.
The third knowledge here from the Tevijjavacchagotta.
The third knowledge
Yes,
is awakening from the dream of existence.
yes. This is the third knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And the knowledge, the first knowledge and the second knowledge is not a necessary condition, right? It's
No.
only for the Buddha, huh?
Yeah, Buddha and some other people were able to get that.
Yes.
But that is not an essential thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Bhante, I think it's related to his questions. As ordinary people like us, lay people, householder, so I'm asking this question for please just enlighten us. See, for the last two sermons, Bhante, or also previous sermon, Bhante has always said that the idea of existence for us has to be disappeared, okay, to be free from suffering. Therefore, we need to change our way of thinking.
Yeah.
Okay? So now, as a lay person, this is, to do it is quite, can a lay person have this sort of ability to do it? Or is it you need to be an arahant or the non-returner to do it? Because conceptually, or philosophically it sounds very logical and very real. But the mere fact, the conventional truth is that we actually physically exist. We physically suffer. So how do we reconcile, that just by disappearing our idea of existence, even we can change our way of thinking, which is quite tough because all the while we have all the habits. How do we reconcile that? Because we actually exist. I mean, conventionally. Of course, ultimately, yes, whatever Bhante's sermon has been doing is the ultimate truth. But for lay people, for us Putujana, the conventional truth, how do we reconcile? Or is it at this level we can't reconcile? Is it that we have to do more sila and bhavana and all to reach to the other stage, the non-eternal state, the arahant state? Then only we can have this sort of idea. Can we? Because
I will explain that. Now this is where we have to understand that we have these two parts of the mind, the thinking part and the emotional part. So when we think, I exist, how do you know? How do you know that you exist? Is it... I'm here. How do you know I am here?
I mean, of course, I'm talking about the conventional truth. Of course, ultimate truth, yes. But
no, the important thing is to understand that why you think you are there is not a rational concept. You are not thinking rationally and coming to the conclusion, I exist. This is happening due to the emotion. You feel I exist. Even if I explain to you rationally, you don't exist, and even if you agree to that, intellectually, you still feel I exist. So it is the feeling that is saying I exist. So this is why it is necessary for you to relax your body and calm the mind and get out of that feeling. When the mind, then the body are calm and tranquil, the feeling I exist disappears. Then only you begin to understand, yes, that existence is not a real truth. Then you are able to understand that the thinking part which shows that there is no real existence here is true. That is, so the important thing for you to do is to calm the mind. And to calm the mind, the first thing is to change your behavior part. Without changing the behavior, you cannot calm the mind. So changing the behavior is what is called sila. And then calming the mind is what is called samadhi. And when the mind is calmed, then you can think in a different way. That is what is called panya. That's how it goes. So it has to go in stages like that. Huh? What?
The vipassana, when does it kick in? Before one can change the thinking of existential thinking. So when does this vipassana process come in?
Well, what you call vipassana is that you have to go through these three important steps: sila, samadhi, panya.
So once the mind is
Huh?
down, does that mean once a person's mind comes down, so he introspect inside, I mean he is practicing this vipassana, can I say that? And then he see the process, how the process take place, all these things.
Okay. So let us now bring this to an end.